Welcome to Adapt Pro, the podcast about staying sharp, adaptable, and ahead of change. I'm Katarina Audeman, a business and marketing student and creative storyteller, exploring how people build meaningful, resilient careers in a fast-changing world. Today's episode connects AI with transformers, and no, not the algorithm or the action figure. I mean the literal copper-wound transformers that have been powering computing and innovation since the 60s. Innovation gets all the attention, but some of the technology powering our world is nearly 200 years old. Power transformers, essential for everything from homes to massive AI data centers, still follow the same core principles today, yet the demand for them is rising fast as tech evolves. My guest works directly in transformer manufacturing, blending long-standing methods with newer equipment and updates. I think it's a perfect example of how even the most traditional fields stay relevant in a rapidly changing world. Thank you for joining us today, William.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I wind transformer coils. So, it's something that, a lot of people don't think about, there's something that, you don't really notice until you know what you're looking for. I don't know. Have you ever, thought about it beforehand?
So I actually haven't, and I kind of wanted to tell the story about how we even met, which was like 2 months ago on a 2-hour flight to St. Louis, Missouri. Probably the most random flight I've been on in my life. And we were stuck on Southwest, so there's no assigned seating, and it was me sandwiched in the middle, and William was on my left, and this sweet old lady that works in veterinary medicine was on my right. And I had just got back from the marketing AI convention in Cleveland. So I'm filled with all this nerdy knowledge. I'm feeling really good about it. And I just couldn't shut up about it. So William and this sweet old lady were just hearing an earful from me. And of course we had topic breaks talking about food and K-pop music, all of that. But really, we were on the topic of, AI, some of our concerns and stuff. And then I was asking him what he did for work. And he was talking about these transformers. I'm like, oh, well, I don't know a lot about that. So I think maybe what we can start off is what you do. Could you walk us through, transformer manufacturing and tell us about the newer machine you use and how it improves your workflow?
Yeah. So the transformers, they're basically coils of wire. It can be, copper, aluminum, and they're wound and they're stuck onto an iron core. And what that does is it uses the electromagnetic current to, change, the voltage of the power that's going through it. And so I only work in the coil winding. I do specifically the winding of the wire around the mold for the coils. And so the machine that I use is a bit newer than the others. A lot of the other machines they haven't really changed in a while. We've even gotten some newer ones in that are pretty much the same as some of our older ones. And they, there's nothing new to them really. That's basically the same design as it's been for a while. And I guess if they broke, don't fix it. But the one that I use is actually a little different. It has a set of pulleys that guides the wire into place as I'm winding. Kind of like a CNC machine. It's got programs that have to be written down for the computer to read off and guide it in, whereas with everyone else, they have to manually do that. And so it's a little bit different operation that can speed up my workflow by increasing the precision. When you've got, things that are, you need to have them within a 32nd of an inch. being able to have that machine do that for you is really a help.
Yeah. Honestly, I had to do a lot of research about Transformers when I was a kid. And, there was always that stuff on the news about like Transformers blowing up. And, and when I'm like 5 years old, I don't know what that is. So I'm like, dude, why would Bumblebee do that? That's not cool. Everyone's like freaking out. Obviously, not that type of Transformer, but Transformers, make it possible for a lot of our sources of energy, but specifically for, data centers and AI as a whole also, but they rely on principles that go back almost 2 centuries. I told you before we started recording, I've been nerding out, digging into the history, and it goes all the way back to, Michael Faraday's discovery. Himself. Yeah. Michael Faraday's like discovery of electromagnetic induction and even getting into, Westinghouse, Stanley, Tesla, all these things. And, it's really fascinating. And much of the process is still, basic or analog as you described it. Why do you think those methods remain reliable?
I think that there's just a lot of things that, adding that extra layer of complexity by, usually the method people do nowadays is, they strap a computer to something and make it smart. And I think that there's a lot of things that we do that just, can't really benefit from that, and like you said, it's really no different than it was 200 years ago, from the discovery of electromagnetism.
If it's not broken, don't fix it type thing.
Yeah. And so it's like, the machine that I work on is a little bit different. It is a bit representative of how things can be. But, it also has its pros and cons as well. It's not quite as versatile as the other machines that are used in our shop. But I know that these machines, they work well enough for us that, we don't really have a problem with them. And so I feel like that's why they haven't changed, is there's no incentive to change them.
Fair enough. So connecting it with AI, since that is like the biggest thing right now, there's definitely a correlation between AI and Transformers, but, obviously not a causal one. It's not cause and effect. But the technology, they grew together around the same time. And I thought it was really interesting when I was doing my research. Obviously the Turing test back in the 50s, where AI and all this complex computer stuff started to happen. And then you get to the ELIZA project, where it's asking about depression and having human conversations. The 60s were a turning point for both computing and electrical infrastructure. So, large scale, reliable transformers became essential for mainframe computers, early data centers, university research labs, government computing facilities. And I think a lot of this had to do with, all of the wars that were going on or had just ended and things like that. But also technology as a whole was just booming at that point. But the transformers became critical for delivering that power. And without stable, scalable electrical infrastructure, that early computing that is way more advanced today wouldn't have been reliable enough to run experiments like ELIZA or early neural networks and stuff like that. I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if you've researched any of that, William, but I kind of nerded out a bit.
Yeah. But yeah, I know that it's really essential for any kind of scaled up power. Anytime you're moving power or energy of electrical kind, from one place to another in large amounts. Like, I think another recent thing is electric vehicles. They have a lot of power requirements, and those as well. We've dabbled in things for that. Mining, and one thing I actually do a lot of work for is a company called Oceaneering, They specialize in a lot of submersible vehicle technology, and it's really interesting to see the applications.
Wow. So I know we talked about it before the podcast. We were texting back and forth. How does your work connect to the growing power demands of AI? Because you had mentioned some of the supplies and orders and stuff were getting messed up because it's increasingly in demand. So some of your clients are shifting a little bit there.
Yeah, there was a huge contract for an AI company that required us to buy out basically our entire suppliers copper for the rest of the year, really, because there was this huge demand for this brand new unit that was custom designed for them. I think that's definitely showing a shift in what the priorities are for the technology now, and I think that we might even be able to continue working on that with powering AI data centers. I know that the other companies might be able to use units as well of maybe different designs or retooling something, but it's interesting to think that this relatively simple device is so critical.
Yeah, something that I saw too, because I know your company does the really custom, well thought out copper, but part of that with the intricacies that go into that, I guess is something with the data centers. It's better for that, especially since they are growing so much. So I think that's why they are in high demand, because the other solutions or resources for that are one, just straight out terrible for the earth, and two, I think they just probably don't work as good. So I don't know if you know anything about that. Obviously, that's more of your profession.
Yeah, that might be a little above my pay grade, but yeah, I know that it was a custom designed to order specification. Apparently, I guess their application needed something that was not previously offered by anyone else, and so that was engineered specifically for that.
Fair. So again, I'm just nerding out over the history stuff, but it wasn't always data centers for AI, and I think the data centers that weren't for AI back in the 60s, I was talking about with the correlations, definitely made way for the big consumption of transformers, material, copper, and stuff like that for AI now, because back in the 60s, those data centers were primarily, large, isolated rooms housing mainframe computers and just processing large volumes of data for businesses and government agency stuff that, general public probably wasn't much concerned in. But I think that just kind of shows how the tech has evolved so much. And as it does evolve, the importance of transformers keeps growing. And I think you're seeing that in your field. How do you see your work enabling rapid changes in technology? Even in a field built on long-standing practices.
I think it's if the things, the products we make can't really change that much. I think it's more of the applications of that will change, and how existing designs can be engineered to work for new avenues of business, like how we've seen with the AI growth. Maybe there will be some advances in material science or something that allows us to change the way things are made. I'm not entirely sure. There's definitely a lot of uncertainty, and I think with AI, it's more of this hoping that it's not just a flash in the pan, and that it's something that's going to continue, bringing business.
AI in general, or even with how fast it's moving, how fast technology is moving nowadays. So I saw a post the other day about ChatGPT only came out 3 years ago. It feels like it's been like a decade with all of these updates and crazy things that have been happening. And so like we don't know what to expect tomorrow or next week.
I feel like part of that copper shortage that we're having is due to that, just explosive growth they've had over the past 3 years.
100%, especially starting in 2020 when it really was kicking off and all these companies were coming out with their different language models and stuff like that. When I was nerding out, I can't remember exactly what it was for. I want to say it had something to do with the release of like personal computers, like when people started to first get their PCs and their homes before Apple and Microsoft really started booming. There was a copper shortage there as well. So, I mean, I would hope we can kind of figure that out like we did, over 50 years ago. But I think also with data centers and AI in general, there's this big concern and question about our resources and how it's impacting the earth and all of that. And I don't know much about where copper even comes from. So maybe you could speak a little bit on that because you guys use tons of it, for what you do.
Yeah, we use a lot of copper wire and aluminum wire. And I'm not too privy to the details of where it comes from either. But like you said, with AI, taking a lot of resources and causing shortages, I've seen that as well with personal computing as well. There's a lot of shortages with, memory. So now there's a huge skyrocket in the price of computer RAM that uses copper and other resources that these AI data centers are, just gobbling up every single day. And it's not exclusive to just one thing either, I think.
And I kind of know your thoughts on AI because we talked about it for almost the whole 2 hours of our flight. You're definitely a bit more skeptical about it, which I think we see a lot of that right now. There's a lot of fear surrounding AI, and it almost feels like it happened like last week overnight because everybody was super into making these funny Sora videos and using ChatGPT to answer their questions. And there's definitely been a huge shift and people kind of freaking out because, like I said, it's not like it's a new thing coming out every other month. These are new models, new advances every day, if not at least every week. And it's overwhelming and people don't really know whether to trust it or if it's something that's going to be sustainable. How is it affecting, our lifestyle, our education, our mental health, stuff like that. I know you and I were talking about, education and if kids should even be learning about it and stuff like that. If you want to touch on that a little bit, because I think it is important to have different perspectives on this because I think it's cool, but I know there's parts of it that are.
Yeah, I think, with regards to education, with America going through a literacy crisis as well, I feel like having this AI that you can really only interact with by typing out to it or, talking to it, and it only understands prompts it understands prompts better when you're more specific. I feel like it's this double-edged sword of, this AI will make things quote unquote easier for people who already don't fully grasp what they're doing. There's, concerns about data privacy, where all this usage data is going, and there's concerns about the environmental effects of both the energy usage and the resource usage. Another thing too is, like you said, it's been about 3 years, and I know just consumer facing, like everyday people, really the only application we've seen now is just creating videos or creating images, and it's, well, what are we spending all this money on? I feel like is the general consensus.
Yeah. I like what you said about the literacy aspect, because we're seeing the effects by a very large scale. I keep falling upon the side of LinkedIn and Facebook and X and whatever, where everyone's like, AI is the demon. You know, it takes too long to get the results I want. And a lot of it comes down to what you said about prompting. You have to know how to prompt, and that all comes down to your writing literacy, your skills of understanding what the idea is that you have in your head, and can you articulate that into a well-written prompt. And with concern to education, you know, not everybody's there. So I think that adds an extra level of frustration on top of all this uncertainty with AI, because yes, it's accessible to everyone, but not everyone is being able to master it as easily or as fast as they want to. And I think that's adding a little bit more of hostility to the subject as well.
Yeah, I know. It's sometimes hard scrolling through social media with all these typos. That it's things that I feel like I was taught back in English class in middle school, and you really do see it in the real world a lot. You know, with literacy and how people are able to convey their ideas.
Yeah, I think also with the security concerns, I just finished my certification from SEMrush. I'm kind of blanking on the name of it, but it was going into like sitemaps and how you can basically instruct those AI bots to look at your page, but not take that personal information. Like, you can block those off. But I think that also, that's an evolving technology that maybe not everybody is, one, aware of, or two, has mastered, because everything's just moving so fast. And I feel lucky that I'm like constantly researching it and learning and whatever. I don't think a lot of people have time for that, or maybe they just don't know where to start also. And we're like completely off topic of Transformers, but I find that interesting. But I think my last question about Transformers in general, or maybe even Copper One specifically, is what do you see the future trends of it being, especially with AI data centers? Do you think, you know, business is going to boom, or do you think this is something that's going to hurt you guys in the long run?
To be honest, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it's either way. We've essentially made our money off of initial units that we've built for our contract we had, but I think that in the future it's more or less whether or not how much we will dedicate to, you know, the service life and replacing of these and supporting the expanding infrastructure. And I think that's a question of how much there is to be made in that sector of business, and whether or not, you know, it's viable enough compared to our more traditional route.
For sure. Well, thank you for talking to me about the field you're in, what you do for work, especially for hearing me out about nerding out about this, because I do think it's really interesting. You know,
definitely is, yeah.
I'm like a big AI and history nerd, so like seeing all of that come together with Transformers and electricity and all this stuff, I'm like, whoa, I'm just like connecting dots. I went to Niagara Falls a few months ago, and they had like a huge exhibit on these different electrical innovations and Nikola Tesla and all of that. And I'm like seeing these similar names pop up, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's all making sense now.
Yeah, and like, you know, once you really look at it, you realize how many things in your daily life use them. Like, you know, in music, for example, like amplifiers actually do use miniature ones. Maybe not the same as the ones that I deal with, but the same principle. Or even some miniature computer chips as well.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think if you haven't fallen into the rabbit hole, that's like my homework for the week for my listeners, probably. So, to our listeners, remember that today's innovations are built on centuries of ideas, especially your current AI bot is because somebody came up with these ideas of transformers and these electrical advancements 200 plus years ago. And even the simplest technologies still power our future. And as always, stay adaptable.